Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, this is going to be the top 3 theory crafted builds for Warlock that I've been thinking about, and I just want to let you know, these are just theory crafts because I haven't actually played with anything with Warlock, so anything could go. The patch notes could change anything, so keep that in mind while watching this video. These are just ideas that I've had while staring at the Warlock stuff for the past few hours now. So let's get into the video and talk about the first build, shall we? All right, so the first build that we're going to be theory crafting is, of course, Witchfire. The idea with Witchfire is whenever we gain Ignite Overload or Damned Overload, all ignited and damned enemies within 15 meters are inflicted with Witchfire for 12 seconds. And of course, Witchfire is 300 flat necrotic damage over time and 300 flat fire damage over time. Then, of course, whenever we are overloaded, we can spread those Witchfire by hitting enemies, and we can also gain a very large portion of more damage by stacking global ignite chance and global damned chance. This makes it so that Witchfire can actually clear trash. We can apply Witchfire to everything in the pack, and boom, they all die, because Witchfire is going to deal a very large portion of damage. And thanks to the rest of the Warlock tree, all of it facilitates this even more. Now, the only problem that we have, of course, with Witchfire is its application. So EHG threw a wrench in my plans. When I read the overload stuff, I thought that you'd be able to re-trigger the overloads at will whenever you get up to the same amount of ignites over and over again, right? So when you cast a fire skill and enemies within 15 meters have a combined 25 or more stacks of ignites, we consume them and of course trigger flame whips, and we gain ignite overload for 12 seconds. But it turns out every overload has a cooldown of 12 seconds, meaning we can only regain them after 12 seconds, which means if I were to utilize ignite overload to trigger Witchfire, I would have to wait a whole 12 seconds to actually make it function, which is kind of a problem because not only can you not really control when you have those ignites on enemies and stuff like that, you also can't really control of when the Witchfire attack goes off unless if you are very particular with the skills that you're utilizing, which makes Witchfire significantly less good than I thought it was going to be. But thankfully, we have a solution. So if you see there, when we gain Ignite Overload or Damned Overload, right, those we can apply, of course, Witchfire. Thankfully, what's really cool is we can use either, meaning we can either have Damned Overload or, of course, Ignite Overload trigger, of course, Witchfire. Then we can apply that Witchfire, right, and then, of course, we can spread it. So that means that we can apply Witchfire every 6 seconds in theory instead of 12 if we simply just manage our skills. Thankfully, I found a solution for us. So what we need to do is we need to find a skill that is not fire, right? Not a fire skill or a necrotic skill that we can apply a bunch of ignites and dams with without having to trigger these two, overloads, so that we can save the overload trigger to casting a different skill, right? So we don't have to do whatever, right? And this will make it into more of kind of like a combo playstyle, which we'll get into here. So the idea, I have proposed a solution here. We are going to utilize, of course, the sacrifice transplant like loop with, of course, summoned skeleton. We summon a bunch of skeletons, then we sacrifice them, and then those sacrifices will proc. And then what's really nice is sacrifice is a physical spell. And then, of course, we can apply Bone Nova and we can get the speed and range, the Bone Nova pierces, and a bunch of extra bleed chance as well. This on top of all the ignite chance on the tree is going to be great because we're going to be utilizing a pair of gloves called Malin's Hubris, which gives us, of course, our bleed chance and converted to ignite chance. So we have all this bleed chance, and then we have all the bleed chance on the tree, the damn chance, the ignite chance, right? All that's going to be ignited, and we're going to get plenty of ignites to trigger this. But thankfully, when we do our little combo here, our summon skeleton, our sacrifice, and our transplant, we are not casting a necrotic or a fire skill. That is where, of course, Hungering Souls and, of course, the next skill that we're going to be talking about comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to, of course, set up the sacrifice loop. We're going to sacrifice and Bone Nova everything. We're going to apply ignites and dams to everything, right? And then we're going to cast a fire skill. And that's going to trigger Ignite Overload, which is going to apply Witchfire to everything. Now, of course, with our hits, which we'll have plenty of hits thanks to the Bone Nova, right? That means that we will, of course, spread the Witchfire even more and hit the whole screen, which is great. So I actually put this in game here, so we can actually look at this. So I'm going to just do the sacrifice loop, and then I will do that, and then we get a bunch of Bone Novas. That's the idea. As you can tell, we get a bunch of Bone Novas, and then that will apply a bunch of ignites and stuff. And then, of course, whenever we do subsequent hits, we will also, of course, spread it and then spread Witchfire to everything, and everything can have Witchfire, right? And what's really cool is this Bone Nova here, right? Bone missiles. Not only can it pierce, right? We also have speed and range here. We can also get speed and range on idols and on equipment. So if I put this on here, right? The exalted projectile speed for Bone Nova, right? And we do it, as you can tell, we hit almost the whole screen with it, which means we can hit the whole screen, apply ignites and dams to everything, which will benefit from, of course, our ignite/dam overload chance so that we can apply Witchfire to everything, right? And that will be our applicator. So we walk up to a pack, we do this, and then we cast our Fire Hungering Souls, and then everything gets Witchfire. And then, of course, if we do it again, right, that will, all those hits will all spread all the Witchfire everywhere within 10 meters of the hit, and that will spread Witchfire everywhere. And then what we can do, what's really cool, is normally we would have to wait 12 seconds to do Witchfire again to get Ignite Overload, but thankfully we can actually trigger Damned Overload. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a Necrotic Seal in our last slot. Thankfully here, we have Profane Veil. Profane Veil is normally necrotic, and we can of course grab for an extra curse. We can get more damage to curse enemies while concealed. We can do a lot of different things with, of course, Profane Veil. But what's really cool is we can grab this node, which will give us duration with the scepter, and then we can also get duration here, so we can get 50% duration, which will bring our time to 3 seconds duration, right? We're going to be using a scepter, right? Because we're going to be playing Ignite for our single target. So, of course, we can use, of course, the best Ignite Scepter in the game for Firestar's Torch, right? And that will make it so that, of course, we can, get the duration from Profane Veil. And that will be our necrotic skill that we use every 12 seconds to, of course, trigger Necrotic Overload. And as long as we flip-flop between using Hungering Souls to trigger it and, of course, Profane Veil to trigger it, we can apply Witchfire to everything without having too many problems. And, of course, we'll have a 6-second downtime between overloads, which is way more acceptable than a 12-second downtime, which is great. And with this synergy here, we can actually apply Witchfire to everything. Now, I'm not entirely sure if we'll be able to do enough damage with Witchfire to do single target, but thankfully we have a solution to this. If you are unaware of all the builds that we've played in the past, Ignite Hungering Souls here with this node where we make the one big skull, right? And then we grab Fire Skull, and then we grab these nodes here with the Ignite Duration and Penetration, grab all the more damage here, generic, and then grab the more damage here and the more damage here, which this actually gets swapped to Spreading Fire, which is cool, right? All of this combined means that this will give us plenty of single target. We will never have a single problem with single target with this setup of course, Hungering Souls, as Ignite Hungering Souls does a very large amount of damage, and with the way that Warlock is set up, we will do plenty of damage with, of course, Ignite Hungering Souls. And of course, we'll have Profane Veil as just a defensive skill, which can trigger the Witchfires for us. So all that combined means that we can actually play a build where we play with Witchfire for our clear, and maybe single target. We'll see if it scales. But I know with the numbers that I'm looking at here, right, with Grim Halday's Domain, and of course the base damage of Witchfire and all that, we will have plenty of damage for clear. All I'm worried about is for single target, and of course Ignite Hungering Souls has us covered. So this kind of like Bone Nova Sacrifice Transplant setup will be the way to go to, of course, apply Witchfire in a decent area so that we don't have to deal with the randomness of course, triggering our overloads, anything. We can control it and, of course, dominate the end game with, of course, just Witchfire, which is kind of cool. It's kind of cool that we can utilize a passive here to do all of our clear for us, right? I think that's really neat, and I think that's one of the coolest things that Warlock has going for it. So that's going to be my Witchfire setup that I'm going to test when 1.0 comes. This is probably going to be my season starter if I'm not mistaken. All right, so the second build that I want to talk about is, of course, Proc Mania Warlock. So this is one's going to be kind of more of a fun build. So the idea here is we can utilize Chthonic Fissure, which we put it on the ground, and it will shoot out these spirits that will go and seek enemies, right? Normally. Now, what we can do is there is a node here inside Chthonic Fissure where spirits have a chance to be replaced by Chaos Bolts, right? And of course, have less consumption of Chaos Bolts, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to put our Chthonic Fissure down, and it's going to cast Chaos Bolts for us when we clear, right? So now let's look at Chaos Bolts. So Chaos Bolt here, we can have it do a bunch more projectiles, of course. Now it's only a chance to fire extra projectiles, but it's fine. And what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be playing Bleed Chaos Bolts, utilizing something like Torment of the Red Tundra, right? Converting it to damage over time with Bleed. With this node here, like Necrotic to Bleed, right? With the fire, the Bleed Chaos Bolts. And we're also, the Chthonic Fissure is going to proc the Chaos Bolts, right? And then those Chaos Bolt hits are going to proc Rip Blood hits, right? So these Rip Blood hits per chance of intelligence, we just simply, of course, proc a bunch of Rip Bloods, and we'll have them recast on kill, deal more damage, do a bunch of splatters, so they do a bunch of shotgunning and stuff like that, right? And in theory, we should be able to clear pretty well with all these extra Rip Blood procs, right? But that's not the only thing we can do. We can also, of course, proc Reaper of Mayhem with the harvest chance per dexterity, and of course max times for 3 times per second. Thankfully, if we're focusing on bleed, we actually have some synergy here, because if you look at harvest, there's a node inside of it called Crimson Death, which gives it a bunch of bleed chance based on your intelligence instead of necrotic, right? And of course, we can grab bleed chance here. We can grab the bleed chance here and the bleed pen. Of course, we will do the self bleed chance here, but that's fine. It doesn't scale with our stats, so it shouldn't kill us. And we're not triggering harvest enough for that to matter. And we can also actually grab all the crit chance and stuff here, right? And actually get 20% movement speed for free. So this build will actually end up with 20% movement speed. So what essentially happens is we put down the Chthonic Fissure. We have, of course, the Chaotic Rupture with the chance to cast Chaos Bolts, right? And every so often we'll get the full cast of Chaos Bolts. And then those hits will trigger, of course, Rip Bloods. And then those Rip Bloods can do bleed damage and trigger a bunch of blood splatters. And also, of course, recast on kill if they end up killing something, which if they kill something with bleed damage, by the way, that does count for Rip Blood. We have tested that. And then, of course, you can also we can also proc Reaper of Mayhem, which will also proc, of course, Harvest, which will do bleed damage as well, give us a little bit of movement speed and stuff like that. And it's going to be an absolute insane nightmare just playing through Monoliths, putting down a Chthonic Fissure, and just watching everything blow up. And of course, for single target, we can just swap to just casting Chaos Bolts ourselves. The idea is the Chthonic Fissure does the casting for us, so we can put down the Chthonic Fissure, and then that will deal the clearing for us, right? With the torments and all that, right? And then what can happen is after that, of course, we can, of course, use Chaos Bolts for single target ourselves, which is great. And then, of course, we can do whatever we need to do to fix our mana, stuff like that. There's a lot of different things we can go about doing that. But essentially, the idea is, of course, to proc as many things as possible, which is going to be very entertaining to watch. Now, will this end up being good? I don't know. I know Chaos Bolts can be a competitive skill in the endgame because it definitely has the damage to do so, but I'm not entirely sure if it'll end up actually being good. We will see, but I think it's really cool. I think Proc Mania Warlock is going to be one of the more entertaining builds of next patch. So we will have to see how well this ends up being. Of course, we don't have an idea of like what passives we can run. We don't have an idea of like what damage we can do, like to get as much damage as possible, what gear we can run, stuff like that. But the whole idea is to simply just put down Chthonic Fissure and just watch the fireworks go off. We will see if it ends up being good or not. I will definitely be testing this when 1.0 comes. All right, so the last build that we're going to be theory crafting is, of course, kind of like a Ghost Flame autobomber kind of build. So the idea is Ghost Flame is a skill that you can channel to deal damage over time to enemies, right? Now, this has a lot of clearing potential as it does plenty of damage to clear, but it has a decently high mana cost to channel, right? But there's a lot of fun stuff we can do with it. So the first thing that we can do is we can make it so we can move while channeling Ghost Flame, right? With increased movement speed. This does not decrease your movement speed, so you'll be moving at 120% of your movement speed. but it is going to increase the channel cost significantly, right? But thankfully, we have reduction in channel cost here, right? We have reduction in channel cost here, right? And then we can also get more movement speed while channeling. And then to top it all off, in theory, we can also grab Fiery Desecration so we can deal damage in a circle. So we can kind of just go through monoliths and kill everything on our way. And then, of course, we'll probably invest into something like Flames of Misery to do ignites per second, and we'll apply ignites to enemies. And we also get an insane amount of ignite and damn duration, which means we can do a lot of more damage to just enemies in general, get a lot of channel cost negative, right? Stuff like that. And we can just zoom through monoliths. Now, the biggest problem is no matter what you do, no matter how you try, you're not going to regen mana while channeling, right? Which is, of course, a big no-no. That's going to be a problem. But thankfully, our little truck here that we're going to be playing, like this little car that we're going to be playing, has a way to refuel. So if you are unaware, there is currently a loop that we can utilize. Now, of course, this might not exist next match because it's overpowered as hell, but what we can do is we can place a drain life on the ground, right? And it's going to cost a lot of mana, right? Thanks to these nodes, dark shackle stuff, right? But we're also going to get a bunch of targets, and then we're going to suck our minions for mana per second. And of course, we're going to make it so it only targets minions. So we're going to summon minions on the ground, and of course, have them inside the drain life, which is going to deal damage to them, of course, right? In theory. Hopefully, we'll run a build that has very low flat damage on its gear, and we'll focus on ailments, which means the actual drain life won't kill our minions instantly. Then, of course, we summon skeletons. Of course, we get as much skeletons. We summon multiple skeletons. We get skeleton man on skeleton death. Eventually, we can get some summon skeleton resummon stuff, which will give us even more mana with drain life, right? And we also grab, of course, Ages of Death, which makes it so that whenever one of our skeleton dies, another skeleton is healed to full health, which means, of course, they kind of like work together to keep our mana drain going, right? And we get a lot of mana gain per second. Now, the idea here is to build a bunch of max mana. So, of course, if we look over here, we can grab a bunch of max mana here. We get mana per intelligence. This will at least get us to like 300 mana. Then we can run some mana on gear and stuff like that. We can run like an Orion's Eye or something to get even more mana. And then that will essentially be our quote unquote fuel tank, right? And we can, of course, channel Ghost Flame for a while, right? And then, of course, we'll do a little pit stop with, of course, our Summon Skeleton Drain Life loop. Now, of course, this is mana drain per second. This is not, this is gain and not regen. So we can actually place this loop down and then start channeling Ghost Flame and still gain mana as, of course, we're channeling Ghost Flame because it's mana gained and not mana regen. We've tested this before, and it works exactly the way that I'm talking about, which is very cool. Which means, of course, we can essentially refuel our car whenever we need to. So that means as long as we can make our Ghost Flame to do enough damage against targets, right? Which, spoilers, it can very easily, right? Now, the only problem with this build is we're going to do a lot of damage to clear specifically, because all we need to do is clear, right? We needed to just clear things. But the idea here is the problem is with the way that we're dealing our damage, things are going to die off screen for the most part, which means, of course, like we might not get that much drops in the monolith. But thankfully, EHG has made sure that monsters in the monolith don't actually drop loot, and we get most of our loot from objectives. So that makes a build like this even better. So, like I said, this is going to be like pit stop Ghost Flame. It's gonna be fun. And of course, like I said before, with the other build, we can just do some stupid cheesy shenanigans with like Hungering Souls for ignite damage per second and kill enemies that way. Or we can do whatever we want, to be honest. We could technically do bleed Ghost Flame, and we could do like bleed like marrow shards for single target. Like there's so many different ways we can do single target, it's not even funny. So like that problem is not going to be a problem. Single target's not going to be a problem. The problem is, like I said, is just making sure we have enough damage to kill things while we're driving over them with Ghost Flame, which in theory we should. Now, of course, if our mana is too bad, we can get rid of the Fiery Desecration, and then we can just aim at things, right? We can actually even get, for the bleed version, we actually even can cast Marrow Shards as well. And then, of course, we can scale Marrow Shards to be our self-cast bleed thing. So that'll give us even more clear as we're driving our car. which will be very interesting, but you won't get the ignite duration here. But that's fine because like bleed has plenty of support. So bleed Ghost Flame could be really good. Ignite Ghost Flame. I'm not entirely sure about Damned Ghost Flame. We'll have to see how well Damned Ghost Flame is. But if we just get some plus levels to Ghost Flame, plus levels to Fire Necrotic. Now, one really interesting thing, we don't know how this works yet, by the way. So we're not entirely sure. So please don't get angry at us if we're wrong. But I believe that if you use a Twisted Heart of Okrios right here, right, it has +1 to Necrotic and +1 to Elemental. Well, if we keep Ghost Flame as Necrotic and Elemental, we might actually get a +2 from Twisted, and then of course we can get the +4 eventually with Ghost Flame, so we can have a +6 for this, and we can also use like a two-handed staff with like Elemental Staff, right? Where is it? We can use, one moment here, where is it? We can use, where is it? I'm so sorry. Well, we can just use, where is it? Oh my goodness. Here it is. Dragon Staff. So we can have we can have like a +26 or 27 Ghost Flame pretty easily. And we can even use an Omnis if we wanted to get even more plus levels. So the levels for Ghost Flame isn't going to be too much of a problem. So this is going to be a very interesting build where we essentially take Ghost Flame and turn it into a vehicle. And then of course we refill it with, of course, the loop. Now there's other ways we could do this. We could also do like, of course, like Rip Blood, gain mana with Rip Blood. We could do that, cast Rip Blood really fast, right? Like there's we can even use Soul Feast on single target to gain mana technically. Like there's a lot of different things that we can do for the mana cost, right? And stuff like that. We can fix that. And at the end of the day, this will just be more of a fun build. We'll see how well it ends up being. Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. These are the 3 theory crafted builds I have for Warlock. Of course, like I said, these will change if we see patch notes and stuff. These are things that I will be testing when we hit 1.0. We'll see if they're good or not. With all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.